Hi, welcome back to my booktube channel. I know it's been a while, but this time I am back with 9 book reviews and they are books from a range of different genres. So I'm pretty sure that there will be something here for everyone. So without further ado, let's get cozy. Let's grab a cup of tea or coffee and come back to this video so that I can take you through all of these books. So the first book that I have here today is Deep Water by Patricia Highsmith. And this book is a very creepy, suspense-filled novel. It is a work of fiction and largely deals with the domestic lives of Melinda and the antagonist, Vic. So the story is narrated by Vic, so we don't get a lot of the facts. We get only Vic's perspective. And it's about this couple who are in a very dysfunctional marriage, and they also have a child in the picture. And they're constantly at odds because Vic is a very ordinary human being and he does have some very unique interests. He's pretty much your average Joe, but at the same time, he has very creepy interests. Like he likes observing snails for a pastime. He studies snails and he has very niche hobbies, which make him very much your typical sociopath, right? So he has a lot of traits that exhibit sociopathic tendencies and he doesn't socialize with every type of person. He has only a set group of friends that he talks to. So that's Vic. And you also have Melinda in the picture, who's his wife, who is very promiscuous. She doesn't really love Vic, or so it seems, and they keep having fights. He is a little bothered by her behavior, but he doesn't seem to take any action to put Melinda in her place, so to speak. And this is also set in the 1940s. So gender norms and things are very different back then than how they are now. So let's also keep that in mind. And Melinda is someone who is constantly out to irritate Vic, right? So she's always going out with different men. So that's the kind of setting that we enter into. But then all of this really culminates in Vic taking some very drastic measures to change things about his life. And that's what the book largely deals with. This author also inspired Gillian Flynn, who wrote Gone Girl. And I think there are similarities between Gone Girl and Deep Water by Patricia Highsmith. I feel like this is a very underrated novel and something that a lot of people don't know exists out there. I'm so happy that I picked this up and I'm really looking forward to picking up more works by Patricia Highsmith. So if you're looking for something that will have you sitting at the edge of your seat and also immersed in a domestic scene wherein a lot of things are playing out psychologically speaking, there are very interesting things that happen in this book. I really appreciate the ending. The ending was something that really caught me unawares, and of course there were predictable elements that led up to the ending, but I also like how the character is so grey. Vic comes across as someone who is seemingly harmless and you do kind of empathize with him in some instances. Little do you know that you're actually empathizing with a sociopath and someone who's on the wrong side of the law, right? So that's what's brilliant about this book. I think Patricia Highsmith really knows her craft inside out. She has put a lot of thought into each and every paragraph of this book, and it doesn't feel boring at all. And I was quite happy and satisfied with the resolve and the way this whole novel played out. So I would highly recommend it to those suspense fans and fans of Gillian Flynn's work. So that's what I have to say about Deep Water. Ichigo Ichie. So this book is a self-help genre book. I have of late been in a phase where I've read a lot of Japanese self-help. And out of all the books I read, if you're ever looking to pick up a work of Japanese self-help, do not think further, just pick up Ichigo Ichie. This book is just brilliant. It's thin, it's readable, it's very digestible. It will really give you value for money as well. And this book is a handy little playbook that you can carry around. What I really liked about this is that it has some gems of wisdom that are put across in a way that you really want to remember those things, and you might want to make notes, highlight things that you read in this book. I really recommend it to people who are looking for a work that talks about being in the present moment, not getting too caught up about future possibilities. It does give us a lot of insights into how to ground yourself in the moment using the Japanese way of life, because there's so much we can learn from different cultures. And it also talks about the concept of Wabi Sabi, which is accepting that everything is imperfect and how can we continue to embrace imperfection in day-to-day life. There are some really poignant things that this book talks about, but I also thought the translation was brilliant. The translation is done by the same people who translated Ikigai, which is another book that I read a few years ago. It's about joy of little things, like just sitting and pouring a cup of tea for yourself and watching the flow of water. And it also talks about the Japanese tea ceremony and how sacred it is because it helps people be in the present moment. And it's perfect because I think the one takeaway that I have from this book is that whatever feelings that we're experiencing in life, none of it is permanent, right? Everything is transient and it's going to keep passing by. So it's okay to just accept that emotion and know that it's impermanent. So there's no point in worrying about tomorrow, because tomorrow is very far away and we don't even have certainty as to whether tomorrow will come. So we might as well be in the present moment. So if you're looking for a book that will really ground you, I would recommend Ichigo Ichie. I picked up The Lifestyle Diet by Rohini Patel. I really like this book because she talks about the Indian context and refers to recipes that are very much pertinent to the Indian context, right? Indian recipes, Indian food, Indian ingredients. There are about 100 diet plans in this book, and each of the diet plans are for different types of dieting. There's some that's just for day-to-day nutrition, and there's one for like intermittent fasting. And she talks about how to do intermittent fasting and the importance of giving up things like sugar and being in control of eating things that are like ultra processed and things like that. So she also talks about our Indian regional foods, like talipittu, and how that's something that's perfect for breakfast because it has the right amount of protein, the right amount of grains, etc. So she talks about food that's good for your brain, vitamin C, and why that's important, and herbal teas and what benefits herbal teas have and things like that. So this was really cheap as well, and I just picked it up at a crossword one day while I was book browsing. I highly recommend this book if you're curious to know about diet plans, nutrition, your health, taking charge of your health, and all of that. Orienting by Pallavi Iyer. I've always been fascinated by life in Japan, and especially the lives of Indians living in Japan. And I also hope to visit Japan someday really soon. So I'm just putting it out there, universe. This book is about Pallavi Iyer, who lived in Japan for a really long time, I think about 10 years. And she also had kids growing up there, going to their schools and things like that. It was really very nice because it's like a travelogue, very honest. I really like the honesty of Pallavi Iyer writing this here. And she also had a blog. So Pallavi Iyer is actually a journalist, and she used to blog during her years of being in Japan. And ultimately she put all the blogs together and made it into this book. That's how this book came about. And I was really inspired reading this. I thought it gives a very fresh, raw, unfiltered perspective of the life of an Indian in Japan. And she talks about things that she appreciates about Japan, things that she doesn't appreciate as much, the kind of subtle racism that she did experience in Japan as an Asian Indian woman. She does acknowledge all of those experiences. So I would highly recommend reading this if you're someone who's also fascinated by Japanese culture and really want to know an honest take from an Indian about, what's the whole deal about Japan? Why is it so fascinating? Why is everybody hyping it up? And if I want to visit Japan, where do I start? Definitely read this book, because at the end of it, she also provides tips on how to plan a trip to Japan. What are the different resources you can access? What are the things you need to know before you actually go there and things like that? So I really enjoyed reading this book, and I would rate it 4 out of 5 stars. Affinity by Sarah Waters. Now, this book is for those of you who like historical fiction, like me, and for those of you who like things like seances and, books with a supernatural twist to them, and books that are gothic, creepy, set in prisons, perhaps. So this book is set in a woman's prison about 2 women whose paths converge. And I think Sarah Waters does this brilliantly. She did the same sort of thing in Fingersmith, which is why when I came across this book, I was very intrigued. But also the seance element really intrigued me, and I really want to read this book for that. I was not disappointed altogether, but also not very impressed with this book. I really liked Fingersmith. I think Fingersmith is probably her best book that I've read and is 5 out of 5 stars, but this one would just be about 3 out of 5 stars. So with Affinity, it is about magic, and there are things that happen without explanation here, which is what really bothered me. Like, I did want to know what's the logical, explanation for this happening at this particular moment during the plot. And I think it's definitely a plot-driven narrative, but also a character-driven narrative. So it's somewhere in between. And it's not really fast-paced. Like, I did take breaks in the course of reading this book. And, it's definitely got a lesbian love story angle to it. So that's also there. And I wouldn't say this book is for everybody, but at the same time, there are elements of suspense, and this build-up is there, and she sets the atmosphere really well as well. So it's very atmospheric, and it's set in the 19th century in England. So, if you have a weakness for books set in the 19th century, you're probably going to want to pick this up. If you're interested in supernatural elements, such as what happens during seances, how are seances conducted, and how do you speak to spirits and things like that. So one of the women here who's imprisoned is actually a spiritualist. So she does conduct seances, and before her being imprisoned, she was freely making a living out of this. And the other woman aspires to be like her in a lot of instances, and their personalities sort of converge at different points in this book. So they're kind of almost, they feel like the same person, which leads a very creepy angle to this book. So I would request that you read this and form an opinion yourself, but this is definitely very thought-provoking, and it is a very unusual book in itself. That's what I have to say about Sarah Waters' Affinity. Course of Love by Alan the Bottom. I really love Alan the Bottom's videos in the School of Life on YouTube. And when I came across this book in the bookstore, I was very intrigued by the title, because I've always been someone who is interested in the concept of love and, what is love all about? Is it what you read in the poems? Is it what you read in the books? I'm sure there's more to it, and I myself, being married, have a very different perspective on love now than the kind of perspective I might have had 10 years ago in my early 20s, for instance. This book really dissects the whole idea of love and what literature makes it out to be, what pop culture makes it out to be, and it gives you like a very raw and truthful take on love. And I think Alan the Bottom has such an interesting train of thought. Like, the work that he puts out is amazing intellectual fodder for those of us who like intellectual stimulation from time to time. So what he does is he uses a couple at the center of this book, and he uses the tool of fiction to discuss a very philosophical, non-fictional subject such as love. So he builds stories using this couple and says, one day Alex woke up and met Sarah, but then Sarah and Alex had fights. And then he talks about how, had Sarah and Alex chosen to instead approach the problem this way, they probably wouldn't have had such a terrible fight. Then he gets all philosophical, and in love sometimes you're expected to do this, but then instead we humans tend to do that. I read this book with his voice, because his voice is really good for narration, and his YouTube videos are just so effective that I really read this in his voice and tone, and I was really mind blown by a lot of things he said here. It made so much sense, to be honest, and I was resonating with this book. Like when you read poetry sometimes and it resonates with you, and then you're just like, that's always what I wanted to say, but then I could never find the words to say it. And this author, poet, has managed to do that in such an effective way. So you're just like nodding and validating, and that's the whole process of this book, reading this book, and the experience that I had reading this book. So I definitely recommend it. Wabi Sabi, another book about Japanese wisdom, because I was in this phase where I was reading Japanese books left, right, and center. And I think there's the whole commercial thing going on with Japanese books. They're like really making money, and authors are spewing them left, right, and center. So do be picky about the Japanese books that you pick up, right? So there's Ikigai, and now there's another Ikigai journal, and then there's an Ikigai book for teens. So you don't need to pick up all of them, you just need one of them, because most of these books are repetitive in nature and are saying the same things in different ways. So that's something to keep in mind. This book was interesting in that there was some very deep Japanese philosophical concepts. It talks about acceptance, letting go, revealing your imperfections, and being comfortable with being imperfect, and what's soulful simplicity and things like that. And it also scrapes the surface of Ikigai and a bunch of other things. It's a very calm book to have and to read, but it's not the kind of book I would read again. I think between Ichigo Ichie and this book, I would still pick Ichigo Ichie, because that was such a condensed format. This is really thick, and that book had so many gems of wisdom that I think I was saturated when I read that book, and I didn't need this book after that, right? So it talks about kintsugi, which is recreating things that are broken, putting them all together like the pieces of a pot, and then finding beauty in that and allowing the cracks to stay visible. This book also talks about aging and embracing aging, because your body's changing, and just being okay with the change and embracing it. In Japanese culture, they respect things that are growing older and things that age. They're not always looking out for new, fresh, and amazing things that the West tends to idolize. So you'll find a lot of old shrines, and people still give the same kind of respect to an old statue as they would to a new statue and things like that in Japan. So, but I think old things do have a lot more value and significance than the newer things. So that's what Wabi Sabi was for me. It has so many concepts that I can't really summarize this book in one single setting. And there are a lot of activities and exercises as well. So if that's something that you're interested in doing and following through with, then I would recommend this book. Stillborn by Guadalupe Nettle. And this is by far probably the best book I've read in the last 6 months. Highly appreciative of this author. I think this was translated from Spanish. This book is about Laura and Alina, both of whom are good friends. But Alina ends up getting pregnant, even though initially both friends make a decision that they will not have children in their 30s. One of the friends ends up having maternal feelings and going ahead and having a child. But then the child also ends up being subject to some complications, and the whole pregnancy is complicated, and the child has a lot of issues. It's very difficult for her to come to terms with this, and it's about this very heavy subject matter. But at the same time, it's also about contradictions that make up being, a woman, and, should you have kids, should you not have kids? It deals with that dilemma really well and dissects a lot of things that are on so many women's minds, in that it's very inclusive, and it really hits the nail on the head when it comes to these topics. So I would highly recommend this. It's written so well. I couldn't put this down. I really enjoyed reading this book, and I was like, thank you so much for writing a book like this, because there are so many things that we can't even put into words, some of the feelings that women have, which they harbor throughout their lives, and no one really gives them a guidebook about a lot of things, and so many things to consider before you take that decision, and this book really beautifully talks about these women's lived experiences around motherhood and, like the sacrifices that it entails and things like that. So I really was very appreciative of this book, and I don't think I'm doing justice to the review here on YouTube, but I would highly recommend you read it. If even it slightly sounds interesting to you, then definitely pick it up. Motherhood by Sheila Heti. This book was okay. Like, I wouldn't say it was as good as Stillborn. She does a lot of interesting things here because she's in a dilemma as well about have kids or not, and she goes to tarot cards to find answers. She goes to palm reader, and she tries to find answer through supernatural means. She's also very, very conscious of her Jewish heritage, and she talks about, the whole concentration camp issue that happened back in 1945, and how so many of her countrymen were executed, and how she feels obliged, being a Jew, to kind of continue generation that is to follow and to kind of go down that path. But then, does she want to have kids just for that reason, or is there going to be something more? It really is very far-reaching in that sense. That I want kids is a secret I keep from myself. It is the greatest secret I keep from myself. So there is no conclusive answer here. It is not the kind of book where the author comes to terms and finds a solution, takes a decision, and is very confident in that decision. That is not what happens. This book is a conversation, it's a dialogue, and it's a back and forth, full of conflicts. It's a unique book in that sense. The reason I picked this up is because Lena Norms recommends this very highly in her channel, and she's someone who took the decision not to have children, and she recommends this book because this book apparently helped her do that. But there were very abstract bits in this book as well, and there's a lot of family history that's kind of playing a role here as well. It's not a linear book. It does not have a linear narration, and it doesn't follow that type of structure. It's got a very unique structure, so it's probably not going to be everyone's cup of tea, right? So that's another book that I read this month. Additionally, I also read Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. So that's the 10th book I'm adding here to this list. So John Green is a fantastic writer, and I felt bad that I hadn't gotten to Turtles All the Way Down earlier than I did. I have previously read a couple of his works, but I think Turtles All the Way Down is hands down my favorite book by John Green. So this book is about Asa, who is suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder. She's a teenager, she's about 19 years old, and she is going to high school, and she's been accepted by her friend circle. Her friends love her despite her quirks, but sometimes she can also be a little selfish and self-obsessed, and her friend isn't afraid to call that out during the course of this book. So what I liked about this is that, John Green's characters have a lot of substance. They are well-rounded, they are human, they are imperfect, and that's what I really liked about it. And it's actually a mystery novel, so I didn't know getting into this book that it's going to deal with a mystery. and it's a murder mystery at that. So Aza and her friends end up solving that mystery, and it's the journey that they get on, and also Aza's personal journey grappling with anxiety and how that affects her day-to-day functioning, and how she ends up becoming a better human being at the end of the novel, and also solving the mystery, which is pretty badass. So it's a feel-good book, and if any of this sounds up your street, although it deals with some heavy topics, it's still a feel-good book. So if this sounds up your street, then you should definitely pick it up. Those were the 10 books that I read in the last 3 months. I hope that with this video, I have made up for all the time that I didn't post on YouTube. I've just been very busy with work, and I'm likely going to continue being busy with work, but I'm still going to try and make time for YouTube. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please do give it a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will be very grateful for your support. Yeah, to everyone else who hung out even in the 3 months that I didn't post anything, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I will be back with another bookish video pretty soon. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sane. Bye.